Well, there it is, boys. A new trailer reveal for Persona 4 Revival on the Xbox Showcase. I'm pretty sure you've all seen this trailer already and got more hype about it than before. A quick review of the trailer by me. I think this is way better than I have expected. Everything looks so good. Voice acting sounds great from the little snippets of the character lines. The environment and the new camera angles really sells the visual a lot. Overall, Persona 4 Revival has become my #1 most anticipated game to release in the future. I don't think it's really necessary to cover like a breakdown of the trailer frame by frame, as people will already be doing that or know some of the details from the trailer anyways, and that there is a live stream on the 19th this month covering more info about the game. What I'm going to talk about today is something that I am very bothered with when the community is talking about the newly revealed combat mechanic. This mechanic is dubbed Prime Time, alongside its finishing move, Series Finale. Let's slowly digest this one by one. In the trailer of Persona 4 Revival, around the end of the trailer in the combat section, there are some clips of the core investigation team characters doing like a cinematic stylish attack. This is called Series Finale. This is what probably most people would refer to as this game's Theurgy system, as they evoke the same feeling of unique character-defining moments in a battle by showcasing their unique powers. However, curious viewers will also point out that preceding the series finale is a pop-up of a 4 more, instead of the usual 1 more, usually in the Persona series. So to explain this, these new features are connected and are named under one mechanic called Prime Time. Prime Time is essentially a power-up mode where your party gains 4 free turns, separated from the usual turns in the turn-based model, displayed by the 4 more pop-up and the stars on the right. While in this mode, your abilities cost 0 HP or SP, have the ability to baton pass freely between characters, and your attacks will ignore resistances. After those 4 turns are done, one of your party members will do a series finale, which is a finishing move that deals a certain amount of damage. I don't know how much the scaling is, but it essentially is just a finishing move that deals damage. This is essentially what was written in the Persona 4 Revival website. It's not much information, but a lot of people, in hindsight, including me, would get concerned that this mechanic would go really crazy overpowered, that it trivializes the game's difficulty, just like Theurgy from Persona 3 Reload. For a little bit of context, Theurgy has been criticized for trivializing Persona 3 Reload's difficulty by a lot. I've personally made a video about Theurgy and how it became a problem in Persona game design. If you want to check it out, I will link that on a card or in the description. But essentially, Theurgy removes the risk factor of Persona 3 Reload by a lot, as it removes cost by having it cost a unique gauge bar that auto-reveals as you play the game. Persona 4 Revival seems to take that blueprint and change it up a bit to seem even crazier with the free 4 turns. But in retrospect, I had to sit on this for a while, but I think this could be the opposite, where it actually lifted some of Theurgy's main problem. See, one of the main problems of Theurgy is that Theurgy's costs virtually nothing because it requires a special meter that every character has, which can be regenerated fairly quickly. It's pretty slow if you're not fulfilling the gauge conditions of each character, but it can fill up very quickly if you follow the gauge condition. You can even fill them up in one random encounter. All of this, while Theurgys themselves are capable of dishing out huge amounts of unblockable damage, or that it gives huge amounts of benefits for the party per character's Theurgy. Multiply that by 4 for each party member in your party, and you have a recipe for a gameplay loop with no challenge at all. You can cast a party member's Theurgy that wipes enemies in one battle, then you cycle who casts Theurgy on the next battle, while refilling the gauge of the other character who just uses their Theurgy, cycle to the third character, rinse and repeat. So going back to the preview of Persona 4 Revival's Prime Time, one huge distinction of Prime Time is that it only has a single gauge bar on the right, with no gauge indicator besides every character's portrait. This means that Prime Time is a shared party action instead of an individual character action like Theurgy. If anything, we can compare Prime Time with the Magatsuhi gauge mechanic from Shin Megami Tensei 5, which is a much more balanced combat system than Theurgy. But in all honesty, we can't really compare this as they exist in different games with completely different combat systems altogether. from what we can see from the trailers as well. The gauge bar fills upon exploiting weaknesses or dealing criticals by a third of a block in a 10 block gauge bar, accumulating to around 30 weakness exploits or criticals needed to fill up the bar to activate a prime time, which I think is a pretty slow gain. There's definitely going to be a way to increase that gain, but at base it's not going to be as frequent as Theurgy's. All of these accumulate into one mode where the team goes quote-unquote all out at a certain timing. This feels very reminiscent to an existing game that I've played for a long while. Have you guys heard of Granblue Fantasy? A little introduction to Granblue Fantasy. It is a gacha game made back in 2014, which is still running up until now, and also became very huge as a franchise that they made 2 full console games in the same universe, one as a fighting game and one as an action hack-and-slash RPG. The gacha game itself is a turn-based RPG with one unique mechanic that I don't really know if something like this has ever appeared in a game before. So, as a gacha game, every character in Granblue Fantasy is given a charge bar, signifying like a bar for characters to use their ultimate, or like Theurgy, for example. In a party of 4 characters, multiple characters can do their individual charge attacks in a single turn, in a total of 2 to 4 charge attacks dealt in succession. If 2 or more charge attacks are dealt in succession, it will produce a chain burst, which deals additional bursts of damage after the chain of charge attacks ends. With more charge attack chains, produces more damage for the chain burst. Because of this mechanic, Granblue Fantasy players have cultivated the playstyle of saving charge attacks for when you needed a sudden burst of damage to the enemy to straight up defeat the enemy when they are low, or when the enemy has a special mechanic that you'll need that damage to cancel that mechanic. Granblue Fantasy deals with raids with percentage HP triggers. When the raid boss is at a certain percentage HP, they'll do certain attacks that could be a detriment to you if you're not pushing damage to the enemy, which is where the charge attack and chain burst comes in, which makes it like a strategic minigame of sorts. I hope you know where I'm going with this for Persona 4 Revival. I think Prime Time is very comparable to Granblue Fantasy's charge attack and chain burst mechanic. The 4 more of Prime Time is the charge attack, while Series Finale is the chain burst. Solely by having one gauge bar with a slow rate of gain, you'll need a lot of thinking to perfectly time when you should activate Prime Time, which is very similar to the gameplay of Granblue Fantasy to utilize charge attacks for when you need a damage push. I can think of multiple boss fights from Persona 4 that could use this mechanic. And considering that Persona 4 is notorious for their damage-spongy enemies, maybe Prime Time plus Series Finale is a perfect combat mechanic for this situation. Prime Time can be very concerning at face value because of the shiny 4 more pop-up, but all things considered, it's not as bad as Theurgy. It's at least a step up from Theurgy. However, there are still other concerning things about Prime Time itself, like the fact that every attack will just ignore resistances, removing the thought of strategy of exploiting weaknesses, or avoiding dealing an affinity that the enemy are resistant towards. And all of these are also dependent on if the enemies are scaled properly or not. If at least the bosses are spongy enough to justify the 4 attacks in Prime Time plus Series Finale, then it is definitely a great implementation of game mechanics. But if they just left the enemies out without a single spec of rebalancing, then it's kinda just a waste of opportunity. At the end of the day, I don't really know. I don't work at Atlas, and I'm not the one who come up with Prime Time. But we'll see how this develops. Overall, my hopes are still up because Prime Time is, at the very least, a step up to how terribly overpowered and overtuned Theurgy is. And I hope Prime Time is going to be the prime example of a gameplay overhaul going forward. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Don't forget code Izanagi at figures.com, and yeah, I'll see you later.